You're locked in to the hottest station on the planet.
Resistance is futile. The revolution has begun.
You're listening to Rebelpreneur Radio, helping you break the rules and build the business you need for the life you want. And now, broadcasting his pirate signal
from somewhere beyond the status quo,
here's your host, best-selling author, marketing and media strategist, Ralph Brogden.
Hello and welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio. It's the show that helps you build the business you need so you can live the life you want. I'm Ralph Brogden. You've heard me talk about getting people to know, like, and trust you is such an important part of building the business you need for the life that you want, because I believe that we are in a relationship economy. People still want to do business with people that they know, like, and trust. So the question is, how can we do a better job of getting prospects, customers, clients, affiliates, partners, investors, all the people that can make or break your business? How do we get them to know us, like us, and trust us deeply enough to want to do business with us? Today's expert is going to help us figure that out. I'm speaking with Beaulieu. She is an emotional intelligence coach, an economist, a chartered financial analyst, and the author of EQ Blueprint for Closing Sales. She's the founder of Walking Inside Resources Incorporated, a coaching and resource-based company in the field of emotional intelligence and strategic planning for entrepreneurs. And welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio.
Well, thank you for having me on your show, Ralph. It's a pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is mine. Tell us first and foremost, what is emotional intelligence? We know what IQ stands for. What does EQ mean?
EQ is, if I can give an analogy, it's like we may knock at someone's door and they may open the door and we get in. And so we can get into a company based on IQ, how smart we are and our credentials and all of it. But whether we are invited to stay, that's our EQ. That's what determines it. So in terms of sales, in the business context, emotional intelligence, it's a big, big, big subject, and that we don't have time to go in every detail of right now. But in terms of sales and building relationships, it's knowing the difference between our wants and our needs. And for our clients, it's knowing the difference between our clients' wants and our clients' needs.
Interesting. So give me an example of dealing with a client or with a prospect in terms of their wants instead of their needs. How does that translate into our sales conversation?
Okay. For example, I had this client who, when they invited me in, they wanted to increase their sales. They were a national company. They were doing super well. They were doing $16 million in sales a year. They wanted $25 million. They had state-of-the-art facilities, a strong sales force, but the morale of the company, when you walked in that door and you talked to people, it was like the atmosphere, like you could cut it with a knife. It was so stressful in there. And the reason for that was at the top management, there was a clash in vision. Half of the management wanted to consolidate their position. The other half wanted to expand. So they sabotaged each other, which left the sales force in limbo. So in terms of want, what the company wanted on some level was to expand. But what they needed, as to why they wanted that expand, what they needed was to have a breather, to be able to like say, okay, we've come this far, we've been growing for 10 years, like we just need to take a step back and evaluate. So that's the difference between want and needs. A need is emotionally felt. A want is rationalized from our head. Like we should do that. But the need is why we should do that.
Very interesting. So in our sales conversations and in our strategies, you're saying that we tend to be rational and logical without considering the emotional needs, and that we've got to have both. We can't just be one or the other. Is that right?
It is absolutely right. And most salespeople approach their prospect customers from a place of want. They come to the sale and like, can I help you? What do you want? Do you have any idea what you want? What is it? But a want, like when we think about what we want, we can think about a gazillion things. Like a
Right.
customer can say, well, I want $1 million in the bank. I want a new husband. I want a new cat. I want to buy a goldfish. I want to buy a motorcycle. But when we think about what we need, our long list of wants comes down to two things. So if a salesperson wants to close more sales, they must get the customer to reveal that need, that feeling that they're looking to experience with that product and service. Because then if you can connect that feeling to that product, that's a sale. That's why people buy. They think, oh, I should want this. No, we buy it because we think that by buying that thing, it will give us a specific warm feeling, something positive to experience.
Perfect. That's a great example that we don't buy based on logic. We buy based on emotion, and we justify it with logic because we're too embarrassed to say what the real emotion underneath that purchase is all about. But if I'm understanding you correctly, whether we express that or not, if we are a prospect or dealing with prospects, dealing with clients, these emotions are underneath. They are beneath the surface, regardless of whatever external conversation is going on. And if we're going to be successful, we have to figure ways to get beneath the surface level and figure out what's really going on. What are the deep lying emotions underneath all of the rationalization and all the logic and the features and the benefits. But what are the hidden emotions that are really driving this conversation? That's how you work with people, and that's how you help them with not just emotional intelligence, but with strategic planning as well.
Correct. Because what you've just said is what I call tapping into the emotional content of a customer to close more sales. And to do that, it requires emotional intelligence. Because most prospects, if they're looking into a store and they want to buy something, for them to reveal that need, it requires a moment of rapport with the salesperson, a moment where both parties drop down their guard and share from a place of what we call reciprocal vulnerability, where both parties will share their needs. So for a salesperson, it's important that we are vulnerable first. So we give that quote unquote permission for the client to say, oh, I can relate to that. I'm going through something similar right now. I need a breather. I need freedom. I need to feel whatever it is they need to feel in that moment with that product or service.
Interesting. And I think it's important, before we get too far into the conversation, for listeners who are always looking for hacks and for tricks and tips, this is not the sort of thing that you can just kind of work. It's not like a sales closing or some kind of a tactic where you can manipulate people. It's going to require you to really and sincerely and honestly be interested in the person that you're dealing with and being willing to be vulnerable in that situation, and not to try and use this as a way to manipulate or coerce the conversation in the direction that you want to go, but quite the opposite.
Correct. It's absolutely correct. And the way that I teach my clients to do this, to build that genuine rapport, because we can all sense when it's phony. There's something, it's like gritty. It's like sand and water.
Yes.
And I say to my clients, to like salespeople especially, it's like you validate what the customer just said. And you add one more sentence. So you might say something like, I get it. I've been there. And then you add one more sentence that validates specifically what the customer just shared. So they feel seen and they feel heard and they feel that it's okay what they just said or what they need to feel. Otherwise, it might tip the balance too far. They might, the customer might feel too exposed, and all of a sudden they put their guard up, and the opportunity to close that sale, it just ended because the customer walks away oftentimes because they will feel like, well, they don't get me. Why should I buy?
Yeah. Very interesting. And this is so fascinating. I'm already deep into it with you, and I have not even gotten around to asking, how did you get started doing this? How did you get interested in emotional intelligence, and how did you turn that into a business?
Oh my goodness. I grew up ghetto poor, like so poor, holes in my shoes, hand-me-down clothes, like bought for pennies in a church basement. I lived at the end of a dirt road. It wasn't even paved. It was like that kind of living. And that was the number 5 of 6 children. And it was utter violence. It was my mother was like clinically insane. Wow. And my father was like a sociopath. And I grew up and I watched them constantly fight about money. And I told myself, like, I'll never be like them. I'll figure out a way. And I entered university at 16. And for me, education was the way in. And I went and I studied in finance, and that's how I became an economist and a chartered financial analyst. I accumulated all these diplomas. So I looked really good on paper, but there's a big but coming. There was nobody home. My emotional intelligence was practically very, very limited. I felt like there was something wrong with me. I felt I shouldn't exist. I felt that I had an emotional hole within that. I was severely codependent. I was just like, I was so depressed, I didn't even know I was depressed. That's how depressed I was.
Wow.
and I went through life with all these accolades, and people would say like, oh, this is so awesome. And you accomplished this and that. And I would just go, yeah. And I just throw it in the back seat and pick up the next thing, thinking that I could finally feel happy or feel fulfilled. And so I did not know what was wrong with me until I met my mentor, Dov Baron. And I was attending this, one of his talks, and he had asked this simple question at the audience, which was, who are you hurting by playing small? And I went home that night and I just kept crying, and I didn't know why. And I started working with him, and I realized that there was nobody home. I was severely, because of all the violence I had seen growing up, I had shut down emotionally at a very, very young age. So I was like that kid looking in at other people being happy and saying, how did they do it? How did they do it? How can someone be happy? What does that feel like? So I had to learn to feel. So it was quite a process. So I became super vulnerable. I talked about all this stuff, and that's how my business came to be. It got built on vulnerability.
Yeah.
And then all the diplomas came in, and it was like, oh, goodness gracious, I can do good stuff with this now.
Well, that's a classic example of what I call turning your mess into your message. And in your case, you're actually working with businesses, with top executives to help them to improve their emotional intelligence, and particularly for closing sales. You were the founder of Walking Inside Resources, and tell us what that name is all about. I'm always interested in how people brand their businesses. What does Walking Inside mean to you?
Oh, I'm going to tell you a funny story. Before that name came up, remember I said I was emotionally disconnected. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to do EQ work, but I had named my company, don't ask me why, Neo 3C Modality Applications Inc.
Well, talking about being emotionally repressed, that name says it all, doesn't it?
People thought I was repairing computers. So, and then I was like, okay, I need to change the name of this company. This is ridiculous. So I thought, what do I love to do? And I love walking. And I walk a lot, tremendously. I can walk 5-10K a day. And that's how I clear my mind. That's how all my ideas come for books and stuff like that. And that's how I process. I walk. And I'm like, walk where? No matter where I am, I walk inside myself. Because life's a journey within. Then I thought, I'm going to call the company Walking Inside. Mm-hmm. But then the government says, well, you need to be a bit more precise. And I was like, okay, I'm going to call it Walking Inside Resources. And they were like, awesome. And that's how the company came to be. Walking Inside, life's a journey within.
I love that. What a great story behind that name. And, every brand and every name, every business has a story, and it's always neat to dig down. I do that myself. I walk around. I can't say I walk 5K or 10K a day, but maybe 3K. And I do some of that processing as I'm walking around. So now I get it. And that makes a lot of sense. And I really love your name now compared to, that, whatever that was before. That was really.
See, it didn't leave an impression.
Yeah.
It's more like what I call a WTF moment. What was she thinking? What was she thinking? I wasn't feeling. I just thought, I'm going to make that name sound very impressive.
Well, it sounds impressive, but it sounds like a new robot in a Terminator movie or something. It's just kind of scary. It was. But back then, it was just like, it was just where I was at. And it just shows like the growth, the personal growth. I love that. Because now when I say walking, I am walking in. And it's funny because I'm a keynote speaker. And when I end my talk and I say like, my name is Anne Beaulieu. I am the founder of Walking Inside Resources, Inc. The goosebumps, they come. I am so emotionally connected to my brain, to my brand. Excellent. Well, that is exactly where I think all of us need to be in our brand. And if our brand is not doing that, then we clearly have some work to do to make it resonate inside of us so that we can then resonate with other people. It leads me to the next question. As you're working with business owners and executives to help them with their emotional intelligence and strategic planning, what would you say is the biggest problem that you see with the people that you're trying to help? Asking for what they want because they have a fear of conflict. When people think of conflict, they think of it as unhealthy conflict. They see conflict as people yelling. They say, what is conflict to you? People will say, well, it's yelling at each other. It's a silent treatment. It's somebody stomping their feet or storming out of a room. But it very seldom it will occur to people to say that conflict is two people listening to each other's needs, listening with an open mind and an open heart. Most of us haven't been taught that growing up. We were taught to do as we were told or else. So it was always that or else. So most people view conflict as or else. So when I come in, I help people to truly hear each other's needs. Interesting. And that in and of itself is a skill that requires emotional intelligence. Isn't it right that the reason we can't engage productively in conflict is because we have low emotional intelligence? Most people can't handle conflict very well because of that, right? I agree. And it's difficult for people to accept that, because if you had asked me back then, Anne, are you emotionally intelligent? I would have put on the table and said, of course I am. Yeah. Of course I am. But one of the signs of lower EQ is when I ask, how much do you want to be right?
And I wanted to be right. I so wanted to be right. When people talked to me back then, I listened with the intent to rebut.
Interesting.
And if we rebut, then we're not present with what they're saying because we're in our head. We're thinking about what we could agree or disagree with, or we bring back the conversation to us instead of making it about them in that moment and understanding them and seeing life through their filters. That's EQ. EQ is putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes and seeing a situation through their perspective, not ours. And in order to adopt or to be able to, for a moment, to gain that perspective from someone else, we have to relinquish the want to be right.
Wow. Well, now, based on that criterion alone, I have very low EQ.
See, people who say that, I always say to them, you have high EQ. You know why?
Because I'm aware.
You're aware. You're willing to say it. Because we all have that knee jerk.
Yeah.
It's like that we want to protect ourselves. No one wants to get emotionally hurt. So there's a knee jerk.
And even being right is a defense mechanism. We're trying to avoid the pain of being wrong or what have you.
Or to let go of what we think is right. Because we think, like, one of the ways I say this is, which might sound a bit crazy for some people, is like if you take a picture on your phone, your zoom might stop because you would say, well, that's my phone, that's what it says. Like, you would be super right about that because you would show me proof that there's specs on your phone that does that. My zoom doesn't stop no matter which phone I pick up because I don't have that belief. It's now I'm going down the rabbit hole of emotional intelligence, which can be a bit woo-woo. But it's like the Buddhists say, if you look close enough, and if we let go of the want to be right, we see that there was never a difference between you and me. There's only a we, energetically.
Wow. That's pretty deep. Wow, I mean, I feel like I'm getting an education just listening to you talk about this stuff. Our time is really getting away from us, but before I let you go, I've got to ask, what can we begin to do to improve our emotional intelligence?
It's not mine. I saw it in a book one day, and I was like, I forgot the author, but it was brilliant. Take a piece of paper and write this sentence on it. I am choosing to feel this way. When you feel good about yourself, that you've accomplished something, go stand in front of that piece of paper taped on the wall. I am choosing to feel this way. And when you feel like crap, that stuff got to you and you feel like it's a bad day, go stand in front of it. I am choosing to feel this way. And what it does is gradually we realize that we are the common denominator with every experience we have. And the emotional intelligence is choosing how we position ourselves in every situation. We are the master of our thoughts, our feelings, our words, and our decisions.
Very powerful. You are a coach. You are a keynote speaker. You have a lot going on. What are you working on right now that's got you really excited that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I just launched, actually today, I just launched a new coaching program to help women develop a phenomenally healthier relationship with money. I'm writing for Forbes, so I got my second articles published in Forbes today as well. So
Wow.
I'm quite excited about that.
It's a big day for you.
It's a big day. And in November, I'm super... Oh, that's a big one for me. I am the keynote speaker opening for Kawasaki's National Sales and Marketing Conference.
Wow.
On the emotional intelligence. So that one is like a big kudos to all that hard work. So I'm getting emotional. It's a big one for me.
Well, that's really exciting. And I can see, and it's very evident in talking to you, Ann, that you have worked through, these issues. You've overcome, things in the past that other people would have looked at as an excuse why they're not successful. You have turned that around, and you have made that a success in your life. And what's more, you are bringing that message and helping other businesses and other people in those businesses to be successful in terms of their emotional intelligence. And I think it's fabulous. So I wish you all the best. And if our listeners, if this resonates with them and they want to get in touch with you and find out more about what you have to offer in terms of your coaching products and different events and so forth, what's the best way for our listeners to reach out to you?
My website, walkinginside.com. And I'm also on all social media platforms. They can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm everywhere, like on those platforms. But the website for sure, walkinginside.com.
Walkinginside.com. Any final thoughts or words of wisdom that you'd like to leave us with?
Life is a journey within. What is that journey about for you?
Very deep. Very well done. I have been speaking with Ann Beaulieu. She is an emotional intelligence coach, an economist, a chartered financial analyst, and the author of the EQ Blueprint for Closing Sales. She's the founder of Walking Inside Resources Incorporated, and you can find out more at walkinginside.com. And it's been a real pleasure to get to know you. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on your show. It's a real honor.
You've been listening to Rebelpreneur Radio with Ralph Brogden. Download the show notes and much more at rebelpreneur.com.